Two guys have entered my room with handguns and shotguns.
I'm trying to save my dying son.
But it was like that I was locked in a story that I couldn't rewrite.
This would not be my life forever.
There was a good chance I was not going to survive at all.
And that same evening, I shot him.
I said to her, I think I can forgive you.
I'm Zio Bookbinder, and this is Imagine Justice, where we tell true stories about what happens after harm is done. These stories often include gun violence, death, child abuse, and sexual assault. Please take care in listening. These stories are told by the people who lived them.
Hi, my name is Jane Piper, and I live in London, Ontario, Canada, and I am a rape survivor. My story is almost 20 years ago now. It'll be 19 years this August. I was working as a personal assistant in Los Angeles. I was doing some grocery shopping for my boss, and I pulled into the grocery store and was rushing in to do a quick grocery shopping before I picked up my boss's kids to take them to a tennis lesson. Unfortunately, I never picked them up. I did the grocery shopping in the grocery store, and then when I came out, I got into the Suburban, and I put my purse in the passenger seat, and then I turned to close the door. And as I turned to close the door, there was a man standing in the door, and he had what looked like a knife held against my side. Now, I'd find out in a few minutes that it was a corkscrew, but at that point, I thought it was a knife, and honestly, a corkscrew is scary too in the moment. Anyway, he pushed me into the car so that we were both squished into the front seat. And then he locked the door immediately. And I didn't know what to do at first. I started to cry, and he was just yelling at me like, "Why are you crying?" And he's like, "I need a ride to Santa Monica." And I was like, "Oh, okay, how do I drive the car? We're both sitting here in the driver's seat. This doesn't really seem to work for me." And he said, "Get in the back seat." And so I went to open the passenger door because I figured I'd get in the back seat because that's what he said. I don't know if I would have actually gotten in or not once I got out of the car, but he yelled at me not to get out of the car and forced me out into the back of the car through the seats. And he basically kept forcing me into the further back seats. And I didn't understand what was happening. It's very strange when you experience this kind of thing because you don't know what is going on with your reality. Everything is sort of mixing together and you don't know what's happening. And I didn't understand. He said he wanted a ride to Santa Monica, but he wanted me to get in the back of my car. None of it made sense to me. And he was then climbing into the back seat of the car after me. And I was like, well, how am I supposed to drive you to Santa Monica when you were in the back of the car? And he's like, get in the back seat, get in the back seat. And then he told me to take my clothes off. And at that point, I just knew exactly what was going on. And I felt stupid not to have realized what was happening before then. It was awful, and I immediately jumped back into the front seat, practically on top of him, not into the front seat, but in the front of the back seats. And I just started fighting with him and trying to defend myself. And he punched me a lot. It was just this huge fight that broke out. And he at one point, threw me into the back seat again. My neck hit the side panel sort of tub container, and then my neck just continued to keep going in the container. I discover years from then that I had ruptured discs in my neck that would need urgent surgery, about 4 years later. But anyway, he just kept beating me up. And at one point I remember the blood, I don't know if he punched me in the lip or something. I think I must have got a bloody lip because the blood just flew in this circle around my face as my head turned. And it was just this sort of slow motion move that I remember so distinctly. And it was just this moment of looking at my own mortality and thinking, you know what, I need to stop this. He's going to kill me. If I'm going to survive, I'm going to have to allow this to happen and start to plan my survival. And that's essentially what I did. And I basically checked out spiritually. I remember seeing the rape happening from above my body at one point. Doesn't make any sense, but I've heard other stories of people who speak that way about when they're experiencing trauma. He raped me and continued to beat me. And when he was finished, he said he was going to take me for a ride. And I knew at that point that if I let him take me anywhere else, that there was a good chance I was not going to survive at all. So once he jumped back into the front seat with the keys and was starting the car, I jumped into the second seat again and just started pressing buttons. I remember this very distinctly as well. I didn't understand how the windows worked. I was like an infant pressing buttons on a toy when they first learned dexterity. And I was just pressing randomly. And then all of a sudden the window started to lower and I jumped out as he was backing out of the parking lot, and I managed to run into the grocery store, ran in and basically told them immediately, I said, I was just raped in your parking lot. Please call the police. He drove off and that was that. And they took me to the Santa Monica Rape Treatment Center, which is at UCLA Santa Monica. I did the rape kit and they got DNA. I knew everything was to help me. So I went through with it, but it was awful. And they take photos of, every inch of your body, and it's horrendous. And it was awful for a long time. It was really, really bad. I didn't leave the house for ages. I just, I would basically do the bare minimum. I wore sweats constantly. I didn't want to bring any attention to myself. I didn't want anyone to see me as like a person standing out. So I just tried to hide. I was in a lot of pain. I was pretty badly injured, and they couldn't find out what was wrong with my neck and back. I had a lot of pain for a long time. And I finally saw a doctor who was able to do MRIs or CT scans or whatever they did to find out what was going on with my neck. And what had happened was that the discs in my neck were ruptured to the point where the little bones were slowly severing my spinal cord. And the doctor who who discovered this was like, she needs urgent surgery. This, she could have one, a fender bender and be paralyzed for life because of what's going on already in her neck. So luckily, because of this one doctor, I was able to, the difficult thing about what I was going through as well is that I was working at the time of my assault. So it was all part of a work comp case. And the work comp lawyers were awful. Because it was an insurance company, and that's what they do is they question, they question. They don't want to pay out, and they don't want to deal with their claim. And so they try to, they, again, like the defense attorney did at the preliminary hearing, I had a defense attorney that was constantly he was questioning what he said, because I was an actor and I had been an actor for a long time. He said, oh, well, we can't even know that what she says is the truth because she's an actor. And it was just these things I had to go through. And this is I had met at a fundraiser at one point, Chief William Bratton, who was the chief of LAPD back then. And he told me, he said, your rape is the worst rape we have in our LA books right now. We're going to solve, I don't know. He was trying to make me feel better or whatever. You don't really want to hear that yours is the worst case. It's not really what you want to hear, but that's what he said to me. But I had a good support system in my friends and my boyfriend at the time. And I was lucky to have the people in my life that cared for me. And I, got through it. Because I was attacked in my car, it was very difficult to go anywhere. One thing that I discovered right away was valets. If you go and you park somewhere in a valet, it's like, get away from me. Or the squeegee guys that when they want to clean your car windows. That happened to me one night, and I had been fine for a long time. And all of a sudden, this guy came up at night. It was at night, too. It was really weird. I was stopped at a red light, and all of a sudden he came and was cleaning my window, and I was just freaked out. I was so scared, and it just took me back, and I was a little frazzled for a couple of days, getting over that. And that's PTSD for you. I had a really bad experience where I was having PTSD flashbacks of the assault, and I thought, someone I was with was the man who assaulted me, and it was this horrible experience. After a while, I started to heal, and I began to live my life. He wasn't caught until about 9 years later. He had tried to do it to someone else who did not want to go forward with the case, but his DNA matched mine in the system, and that's how he was caught. I basically got a call one day. I had moved from Los Angeles to Vancouver, and I had been living there probably like a few months at that point, and I had left to sort of finally start over, and then I get a call. I got a call from my friend who I had forwarded all my mail to her house because I wasn't, I still hadn't moved fully from Los Angeles. I had stuff in storage, and so the police had gone to her house and they knocked on her door, and I immediately, when she called me, I knew right away that he had been caught. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I was right. That's what had happened. And they sent his lineup pictures. And then I went in and met with a detective in Vancouver, and I did the photo lineup. And of course, they knew nothing about the case. They were just, doing it on behalf of the LAPD. And I picked him out right away, and that's how he was caught. The defense lawyer was trying to say that he wasn't mentally fit to stand trial because he had a brain injury at some point, and he claims he doesn't remember. Although at the preliminary hearing, his defense lawyer was saying things that that made it seem to me like, well, it doesn't seem like he's forgotten if this is what he's, these are the details he's asking about. It was rather personal stuff. He obviously wouldn't remember if he forgot it happened, or he didn't know it happened, the things that his lawyer was saying would not be something he would remember. It was awful. It was a very difficult time when we were going through the justice system because I didn't know what was going to happen. Especially at the preliminary hearing, the defense attorney's job is to essentially question you, and that's their job. And it felt awful. The things that she alluded to, or the things that she was accusing me of, essentially was that, like that I wasn't clear about what had happened, that he, perhaps hadn't done what he had done, or, it was just ridiculous that I was being questioned about the things that I was being questioned, because it happened and there was no doubt about it. That's essentially what a defense attorney has to do is try and make you look like there's something wrong with you, because she needs to get her client off. I invited the media into the courtroom for the sentencing hearing. They ended up filming everything, and the defense attorney was trying to stop them. It was really weird because I wanted them to be there. I was okay being on camera, but the judge said, okay, well, just don't put the accused on camera. And then the videos went viral, and it was just like this whole crazy thing that happened because all of a sudden, this very personal journey that I went through was public, which is what I wanted, but I didn't really plan on, I forgave him at the sentencing hearing, and everyone made such a big deal about that, and it was such a personal thing for me that I had decided, long before I knew I wanted to forgive him, and I wrote the words that I was going to forgive him, and it wasn't until I sat in front of him and I remember saying, reading what I was saying, and then saying, oh, I actually feel this. I do forgive you. I know that you did this horrible thing to me, and you did it willingly, but I forgive you. And it was so healing and so powerful. I really felt like I'd moved on after that. We did like a little press conference outside the courthouse afterwards. And I just felt so free when I was talking to the different reporters, because there was a new level of liberation that I felt that I hadn't felt up to that time. Before he was caught, I always thought of him more like a force of nature as opposed to a human being. So I always imagine that what my experience is like is something similar to people who experience a tsunami or an earthquake or something like that, where I imagine that if your life is destroyed by a tsunami, you don't hold feelings towards the tsunami and feelings of anger towards this force of nature. You just deal with the destruction and heal. And that's how I felt for the longest time, was that I didn't think of him as a human being. I didn't think that a person had done this to me. It was more like this force of destruction came into my life for about half an hour and then left me with the pieces to pick up and put back together. And so it wasn't until he was caught when I really started to think, wow, this is a human being. This is a person that did this to me. And I wanted to know more about him and understand him like a human being. And I still do. We have not met yet, but I've written him a couple letters after he went to prison. He pled guilty and he got 20 years in prison. And he's serving time in a prison in California. My case was very public when he went to trial because I decided I wanted to make a statement in a sense. I wanted to come forward as a rape survivor and say, this happened to me and I'm going to be okay. And I'm okay with you knowing who I am. I don't have shame. I don't feel shameful for what I've experienced. If I was in a car accident, I would tell people what I had, what injuries I had, and I was raped, and I'm going to tell people the injuries that I have. I don't feel shame about it because it's sexual violence. I just never did. It just, it was broad daylight in a parking lot in a grocery store, and I didn't feel like I'd done anything to feel shame about. And I still don't. But I did decide that I wanted to know more about him as a human being, and I wanted to reconcile with the fact that, this was a person that did this to me, and where did his life go? And so I wrote him a letter, and we wrote back and forth a couple times. Unfortunately, he is not ready for accountability yet. He said some inappropriate things in the last letter I received from him, and he just doesn't understand. I think he thinks that I was interested in, he doesn't understand why I wanted what I wanted from him. And so I was in touch with this organization called the Ahimsa Collective in Berkeley, California. They were the ones that got the letter to him and went and met him in prison and talked to him and brought the letter and sent it to me. And I've been working with them ever since. And they set it up so that instead of going to meet him because he wasn't ready for accountability yet, I did what's called a surrogate victim offender dialogue. And I went to a prison in California and near Fresno. I basically shared my story with a group of men who were incarcerated for violent crimes. I shared my story with them, specifically with a man who had done essentially what I had experienced. They're the crimes that he committed, and we told each other our stories in front of their workshop group, and then we answered each other's questions, and it was incredibly healing. There was multiple men that came up to me, and one person in particular who I had been having conversations with throughout the day. He said, because one of the things I said is, I want this man, the man who raped me, to apologize to me one day in a formal way, specifically for, I want to hear specifically what he's apologizing for. I want to hear specifically why he's apologizing, and I want to know why he did what he did, in the best way that he can answer that. A man came up to me afterwards and he said, I know I'm not the person that raped you, but I just want to say that I apologize and I want you to have an apology, and I'm sorry that this happened to you. And it was so sweet, and I'm getting chills just remembering it. It was so lovely that this person was trying to give me emotionally what I was looking for in the best way that he could do it. And I was really touched by that. And I got a lot of healing from this experience being in that prison. I mean, when I first walked in, it felt like I was at sort of new age retreat as opposed to being in a prison, in a maximum security prison. The whole day was just so powerful and so beautiful, and I got so much from talking to these different men, and so much from listening to their stories and hearing that they are owning the shit that they're dealing with, and owning what they've done. And they all are very clear about saying that they're, listen, this happened to me, and this is the person that I was, this is the person that I am. And, this happened to me, and I'm not making excuses for what I did, but this is where I come from. And I really appreciate hearing it, because there's you'll meet people every day who don't own what they do. Some people honk at another person, or, give someone in the finger when they're driving, and, go through life creating, certain moments of chaos without ever really owning, like, oh, I did that. Oh, and to go into yourself and to face what you've done and look at what you've done and ask yourself why, and ask other people why, and to answer these questions personally and with, specificity. I was just so moved by it.
Can you share some of the questions that you asked each other in the surrogate victim offender dialogue?
Well, the big one is why. It's like, why did you do what you did? And were you aware of the person as being a human being at the time you were doing it? Were you aware that you were with another person? Like, that was the big question that I have, that I, because one of the things I said at the sentencing hearing that came up randomly, because I happened to have a yucky hotel that had ants and I was killing these ants the night before the hearing. And I remember stopping reading from what I was saying in the middle of the sentencing hearing, talking about these ants and saying, I killed all these ants. And I'm wondering if in the moment when you were hurting me, was I just like an ant to you, or you don't acknowledge the humanity of the person you're with, and that's why you're able to commit such violence, because you're not present in the moment of being with another person. You're sort of taken over by the rage or the whatever you're going through. And I was really, the questions I wanted to ask were about, what did you think towards this other person? Why did you do this? I really just want to ask the man who attacked me, like, what was going on in your life that led to you committing such violence? What got you to that place?
Did you get an answer?
I did. I don't know if I feel comfortable, there's a lot of history that he had, and that people who commit violence are often what they always say in restorative justice, hurt people.
With the surrogate victim offender dialogue, did anything change for you in terms of your PTSD after you went through that and got some questions answered?
Well, it hasn't happened really since then. I haven't really had a flashback in a long time. It's hard to say if it's because of that or not, I don't know if what changed. It's really just a feeling of healing that happened after I did the surrogate victim offender dialogue. I felt as if I was becoming whole again, that I wasn't so splintered into a million pieces, that all the pieces are coming back together. And that's huge. Wow. Because I think something happens to you when you are experiencing trauma, and your identity splinters. And then when you're safe again afterwards and it's over, there's nothing to bring all those pieces back. That's spiritual work. And that has been, part of my healing process, that I've had, that restorative justice has brought me incredible depths of my healing. There's a numbness that is not as present as it used to be. Like I feel like I'm more present in my life, whereas before I was sort of not. I was sort of just a shadow, just a shell of who I used to be. And now I feel together. I feel like I have, like I can remember back before the assault happened. I can remember at the time of the assault happened. I can remember since the assault happened, I'm aware of all the different parts of myself, whereas before it was just sort of, it's like I was just clamped, like my fists clasped, and walking around like afraid and in survival mode. And I've relaxed a little bit out of that, and just can breathe properly now. It's more of just a feeling of wholeness that I don't know why I didn't have it when I didn't, but I didn't. And now I do. And I don't know if that even makes any sense.
Well, yeah, because you described watching this thing happen to you, that you totally dissociated from your body, right? And you know, when do we reconnect?
My spiritual self splintered off and took off and never came back. Nothing brought me back in. And doing the victim offender dialogues, forgiving the man in court, all of these things have brought me closer to being back here in my body, being present with my spiritual self, with my emotional self, with my mental self, we're all together at being one person again. Whereas it was just kind of chaos, everybody, each person for themselves, for a long time, it was just chaos.
We're all connected to each other, and violence breaks that connection. I can heal myself to a certain degree, but there is a connection that is broken. And that's what restorative justice does, is allows this opportunity to reconnect. Maybe a person causes harm because they're dehumanizing their victim, but also in the violence and that disconnection, I think that as people experiencing violence, sometimes we dehumanize the person who harmed us.
Yes.
And when we're able to humanize them again, we heal.
That is exactly what happened, is that I saw him as a human being and who had made mistakes and done terrible things, but that doesn't necessarily have to be represented by those terrible things for the rest of his life. It is possible that we heal. And I got healing from it myself, and I hope that he gets healing from it at some point as well. I've been working with the Ahimsa Collective even more since I did the surrogate victim offender dialogue. I have started working with a writing program that goes into the prisons, and they are doing accountability and apology letters. And I basically am helping edit and write the letters that these incarcerated men are writing to their victims. And this makes me feel so helpful and feel like I'm really part of the solution, because these are people who have commit, horrible violent acts, and they are wanting to heal themselves and work with with themselves and what they've done. So now I'm working with this program and the Empathize program to help these incarcerated men write letters to their victims. And I love it. It makes me feel like I'm doing something, and that I'm turning this event that destroyed my life for many years. Like I said, this happened 20 years ago, and it's still fresh. Even after 20 years, I'm writing about it, and I speak about it quite a lot. But it's something that you don't leave behind. It affects you. It changes you. Trauma really affects your brain and turns you into a different person that you have to kind of work with and create a new person for yourself. Because the person that I was before I was raped and assaulted is not the same person that I am today. I've had to rebuild. And I am happy to be rebuilding with this work that I'm doing now. I just want to turn this, what was a really awful, horrible thing, into something good that can heal and can teach, hopefully.
Do you have advice to offer to anyone who might be listening who would like to apologize to someone they've hurt?
Wow, that's a really good question. I could ask myself that, because I still, when I was healing from the trauma from the rape, I did some really horrible things through the years and treated people badly. And I am constantly wanting to make amends for some of the things that I've done, and some things I have, and some things I've tried, and some things I haven't really tried enough. But I think the most important thing is that you make it about, that the letter is not about you. The letter is about the person you're apologizing to, and the letter is about what they experienced, and the harm that you caused to that person, and that it's just important. That's not a lot of talk about the self And, I hope you're feeling good and hope things are going well. And, that it's very direct, and that the letter is, an apology for what they did, and to spell out what they did. And don't beat around the bush. Don't sort of hum and haw about what happened. It's important to be clear about what you're apologizing for. And that's really important too. And just to not make it about you. It's not about you. It's about them. That's the most important thing. But I would like to apologize to some people in my life. It'll happen.
Same. I think that's, I'm laughing. It's not funny. We all have people to apologize to. We all hurt people, and we are all hurt people.
Yes, exactly. It's so true.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you. I'm so grateful that you are sharing your story with us. So inspiring and incredible and powerful that you have turned this harm that you experienced into something that is healing and helping and guiding for other people. Thank you for listening to Imagine Justice. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Please leave a rating and a review. I am Zio Bookbinder, the creator and editor of this podcast. This episode was made possible with funding from Canada Council for the Arts. If you or someone you know has lived a story that you think would be good for this podcast, please visit zeobookbinder.com/podcast to make a submission. That's ZEOBOEKBINDER.com/podcast.